Welcome to this edition of Safety First. I'm your host, Tim Kelly. Joined today by Captain Jim Judkins. He's the Emergency Management Coordinator for the City of Suffolk. Captain Judkins, thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure.
And we're here today to talk about the 2015 hurricane season. And just like college football, there are predictions that come involved with the season coming up. But Captain Judkins, before we look ahead, let's look back just a little bit and talk about what 2014 had to offer for the City of Suffolk and kind of the greater Hampton Roads area.
Actually, 2014 was a quiet year. There were 8 named storms during that period. 2 of them actually were major storms. Very fortunately, they did not make landfall. However, we did have one that gave us a lot of heartburn on July 4th weekend that ran up the East Coast, and that was a Category 2 storm, and it could have been bad,
right.
But we lucked out on that one, and we got out with some beach erosion and a little bit of damage down to the south. But the City of Suffolk overall made out pretty good on that one.
And again, we always want to hope these things turn out to be nothing. The predictions are wrong on the good side, so to speak, of things. But looking at 2015, we've actually gotten an early start to the 2015 season, haven't we?
Yes, we have, with Anna this past weekend, and that's actually one, it wasn't very strong, but it actually was one for the history books, because when they started keeping records, the hurricane records and weather records in 1851, this is the earliest named storm that's been in recorded history.
And thankfully, it was a relatively mild one for
Absolutely.
our area, so that's always a good thing. But looking at 2015, what are some of the predictions at this point calling for the season ahead?
Well, again, we're looking at another slow season. Not, all of the projections are not in yet. The Hurricane Center hadn't sent theirs. But if we look at some of the major players, there are lots of folks out there making projections now. But our major players, the Colorado State University group and the folks from the Weather Channel, we're looking at maybe 7 to 9 named storms, with about 5 or 6 of them becoming hurricanes and one becoming a major hurricane, and that's 111 miles an hour above. Long story short, we're looking for another mild season, and we can only hope that it'll be a mild. Now, with that being said, just because it's a mild season, it's not going to be that we're going to be out of the woods, because we just look back into history a little bit. In the early 80s, they had a short season, and there was some major devastation in the Houston area. And we looked at 1992, major devastation down in the Miami area, and Homestead, Florida, just south of Miami. The place was leveled. So we just can't say that, hey, this is an easy season. We can put our guard down. It only takes one.
I was going to say, you just beat me to it. It only takes one, and that one could be one for the record book,
yes,
so to
it's
speak.
good. Very good.
And those are the ones we have to certainly concern ourselves with. But when you're talking about storms, and you know, we hear the phrase nor'easter, tropical storm, subtropical storm, hurricanes, what are we talking about, and what determines what is what? Is wind speed, is that the key factor we're talking with that, or how does that come into play?
Well, when we start talking about the strength of hurricanes, the wind speed determines how strong it is. Okay, they used to use a combination of wind speed, tidal surge, and all like that. But a few years back, they realized, hey, the tidal surge didn't always connect with the wind speed, because we actually saw some events that didn't have hurricane force winds. Example, Isabel, 2003.
Correct.
We had record storm surge flooding for Hampton Roads area. If you had equated that to the old methodology, it would have been a strong Category 2 hurricane.
Got it.
Isabel was just a strong tropical storm. So the Hurricane Center said conditions is what drives the storm surge, and not necessarily the hurricane wind speed.
Now, when you talk about storms, and especially, well, let's back up for a second before I get to that question. Hurricane season, I know, you know, again, it's a marking point. It doesn't mean something can't happen outside of that window. When does it start officially, and when does it end officially, even though Mother Nature is going to do what she wants to do?
Absolutely. Officially, June 1st is the beginning of the season, and it runs through November 30th. And we've seen exceptions to the rule, was named storms actually went into December.
Correct.
Likewise, we have just seen that they can happen in May.
Now, when we talk about effects on the Hampton Roads area, generally, what is the time frame within that period of time that you designated, or that is designated, that we typically see the most activity?
Well, in Hampton Roads, and you could actually move down the Outer Banks line, we're looking for from an August to October window, with September being the peak window.
Correct. Okay. And as far as the impacts that we see from these type of weather events, yes, it is the wind and the rain, but you talk about storm surge, and people think, well, wait a minute, Suffolk's not on the coast, but
Yeah, but northern Suffolk
I was
is,
gonna say.
and not only is it's very a vulnerable part
Yes.
sticking out over the Hampton Roads Harbor,
Right.
but there's a lot of land in that area that's low. When I'm talking about low, it ranges anywhere from 2 or 3 feet above sea level up to up in that area, up in the 20s.
Right.
But there's a lot of vulnerable area down in there, and that's the key. A lot of folks are moving
Yes.
in that area.
Yes.
So when you move in the city of Suffolk, or you're thinking about moving into the city of Suffolk, you need to find out what your hazards are.
And when we talk about finding out what your hazards are, your office can provide part of that service in a way that if you want to find out if you're in a floodplain or flood zone, they can contact you to determine some of that, can they not?
Absolutely, and for those who like to do it themselves, I've actually got some tools on my website
Very nice.
for
Okay.
to do. And the insurance industry uses that tool a lot,
Right.
and as well as there's a lot of computer savvy citizens out there. And this season, I'm going to actually add a storm surge tool on
Okay.
there to help even more with that.
Very nice. And we're going to have that URL for the website that Captain Judkins is talking about. It can be found on the City of Suffolk website, but again, we're talking the Emergency Management Office puts this together. Again, a lot of the tools that Captain Judkins is talking about are featured there. A wealth of information that, again, if we say something, or even if you're just doing some research or some background information checking on your own with regard to what do you need to expect, what do you need to do to prepare, which is something we're going to get into in just a bit. But those are the biggest things to think about. And when we talk about preparing, it's not just battening down the hatches at your home, but it's also knowing your evacuation routes. And that's one of the key things, especially in Hampton Roads. We all know traffic is what it is, and how all of the cities and counties kind of connect up when it comes to that, because traffic has to go somewhere. But if you could talk a little bit about evacuation routes and what we're dealing with here is for Suffolk. I know for a lot of things, we're kind of the path to get from point A, maybe near the coast, closer to the coast, through us to somewhere else. But again, people here need to kind of get in with that flow and head that direction in the event that it's called for, correct?
Right, and that's all part of putting together your family disaster plan and looking at your hazards. There's this concept out there, hey, the hurricane's coming, we all got to go.
Right.
No, you don't.
Right.
If you're not in a flood zone
Right.
or not in the area that's subject to wind damage from trees falling on your house, you can hunker down and ride the storm right very well. So there is the first example of why your homework in developing your plan
Right.
is very important.
And everybody's plan is a little bit different because, again, it depends upon the needs of you and your family.
Yes.
And those can vary, obviously, from family to family, as well as where you're located, like you talked about. And throwing the biggest thing into that mix is what is a storm projected to do and where is it projected to do it? Because, as you said, what may be fine for this community may not be fine for that one, and so on. But again, it's doing your research, knowing your history, knowing what your personal situation could be, and certainly following weather forecasts and all the updates that are provided both from the City of Suffolk and certainly from National Weather Service and other groups like that that are helping get information out there to the public. And one document I did want to make note about was there is a emergency evacuation guide that's put out, I believe, by the Department of Emergency Management.
Department of Emergency Management
Yes,
and VDOT
VDOT
both
together,
partner
yeah.
with that, and the 2015 will be out very soon.
Okay.
I'm waiting delivery on that right now.
And then again, in that guide, you're going to find information about the evacuation routes for Hampton Roads, what you need to do to prepare, which includes your emergency preparedness evacuation kit, correct? And again, things probably also, I believe, in there as well as things you need to do for your home, some basic things like that. And really just things to remember when those situations come up. They're stressful enough.
Exactly.
And forgetting this or that, or not accounting for your pets, not accounting for people that may have special needs within your family that aren't already adapted for, because just because you go to a shelter, you need to make sure you know in the event that shelters are required. And if you could just talk a little bit about shelters here in the City of Suffolk. What are some of the bigger ones? And I know, again, the situation will dictate what is open, when, and for how long.
Right. In years past, we've opened 3 shelters up with Kings Fork and Nansemond River and Lakeland. We're probably going to be scaling back that a little bit for just the basic events.
Sure.
And again, depending upon the situation.
Right.
But the best shelter we have as far as the services that can be offered, which as far as full support
Yes, sir.
to people with functional needs, would be Kings Fork High School, because that's the one that's fully generator powered.
Got it.
And even people with basic medical needs, some of their equipment is battery operated, but there's some individuals with certain medical needs, they have to be in a controlled environment. So that's when it becomes really important that
Correct.
they have a place where there's heating and air conditioning to control the environment they're in.
And given if there was a situation where we were opening a shelter or shelters, certainly information would be put out there to say what type of shelter, what each shelter can accommodate, how it's set up. Certainly you have a maximum capacity, but more about the actual individual parameters and setups and needs and things that can be serviced at these sites, correct?
Basically, according to ADA guidelines, we got to offer basically the same service at every shelter to everybody that walks through the doors. Now, there are certain individuals with more advanced medical needs that you can't, that is just not available in what we call a general population shelter.
Yes, sir.
That's why Kings Fork is so important to take that level of the population. We've got a capacity for 50 hospital beds within that people. Those are obviously people that are in home, they're bedridden, and they're not bad. They're not in serious enough medical condition where they should be in a hospital. But in most storms, in a lot of storms, that's where they wind up. And the hospitals, you know, they're not equipped to handle that.
Correct.
Therein lies the importance of this medical shelter, where we can take the load off the hospital and put them in an environment where they can function just like they did at home without overwhelming the hospitals.
Correct. Now, one thing you mentioned earlier, we have talked about there are people still moving into the Hampton Roads area every day.
Every day.
And, you know, be it you come in for military or whatever other reason you come in, and people may have come from an area where you haven't dealt with a hurricane before or a tropical storm before. For someone who's new to this type of weather, you know, again, if you may be coming from the Midwest, you have your own challenges to deal with when we talk about weather. But what are some things you would suggest to someone who's never had to deal with those? I think certainly following the track and listening to reports, because you don't just start the day before. You start a little bit out. Certainly you handle that with your job. But if you could talk about someone who maybe has never been through this before, what are some things they need to start working on now as we're just kind of getting into hurricane season?
Yeah, and I alluded to the first part of that a little while ago when we were talking. First thing is learning the hazards for your area. Right. Do I really need to evacuate? What can I expect for the storm? So that's the first step on that. Knowing where your shelters are. That's the next step. Right. Knowing the evacuation routes out of the area. You know, those are all pieces of the puzzle of creating your family disaster plans. Knowing where I can go to get food when the lights are out.
Right.
Okay, we're very fortunate in Suffolk. We have several stores that have generator power. Likewise with banks. Where can, you know, when the lights are out for a number of days, where can I go to get some money?
Correct.
We're fortunate enough we have a couple of banks that can operate on generator power. So this is all part of putting your plan together.
And again, that's good advice whether you're new to the area or not, quite frankly.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to say, well, if you've been here for a while, don't worry about it. But again, we have kind of been lucky in the, so to speak, the last couple of years. We haven't had a major storm to impact the area, but there's always a new year, which always offers new potential for something to happen.
Absolutely.
Now, when you talk about a family preparedness plan for disaster, and we're not talking just hurricanes, but what are some of the things that you need to incorporate into that? I know you talked about knowing, you know, your risk, knowing how to where to evacuate and how to do that, the shelters, things like that. But there's also other elements of that when it comes to what you're going to do for your individual family, correct?
It sure is. And when we back up a minute talking about flooding,
yes.
If you're in an area subject to flooding, do you have flood insurance? Obviously, if you've got a mortgage on your home, your mortgage company will make sure that you have it there.
Right.
But if you're fortunate enough to have your home paid for, you may want to take that into consideration, because your homeowner's insurance does not pay for flooding from a named storm, and they're getting even more selective on what they pay for now. If it's a named storm, you know, the deductible is this way, and those are things that vary from insurance company to insurance company. But flood insurance, regardless of what insurance company you buy it from, has the same rate. That's controlled by the federal government.
And of course, the thing with flood insurance and thinking about things to prepare, if the storm is named and it's coming to the area, it's probably a little late in the game to be calling your insurance agent to get the insurance at that point in time.
Absolutely. You have to have your insurance in effect at least 30 days before the storm strikes.
So it's not a last minute preparation
thing. You should be doing that right now.
Correct. But as far as other things, as far as if it comes time to evacuate, and whether you're going to a shelter or going to somewhere else further away from the area, things to bring with you to prepare. And again, you don't want to be throwing it in a bag at the last minute for some of these items that we're talking about. Getting ahead, staying ahead, preparing the keys there, right?
Right, and the kit, the composition of the kit basically depends on whether or not you're going to hunker down at home or whether you're going somewhere. And some of the basic things that you need in the kit, regardless if you be staying or going, obviously you need some water, some non-perishable food items. If you're on the road, like that, you should have copies of all your prescriptions with you. If you wear glasses, extra glasses with that. Pets have the necessary supplies and equipment to keep your pet. Crate if you're transporting in, all the medical records for your pet, because that becomes important. If you wind up in a shelter somewhere, if you can't produce those records, it might create some issues for you. Another piece of advanced homework you might want to do, if you know where you're going to go, you can check ahead of time to see which hotels allow you to have pets in, because not everybody allows you to have pets. So you need to determine that list of hotels that accommodate your pets. And you can find that at AAA and various other sites to get that information. In addition, if you have people in your family with medical issues, you want to make sure that you have all the supplies necessary to where that person can live the same basic quality of life that they had at home. The personal hygiene items, the meds, and so on and so forth. If they're in an electric wheelchair, spare batteries, something to be able to charge the wheelchair with. And the list, again, varies between individuals like it. But if you get all those things and create a checklist ahead of time, then it makes it relatively easy. As far as the supplies, you can package them in whatever is your favorite type of container, whether it be Rubbermaid container, backpack, duffel bag, or whatever. The easiest way for you to move them. Kids like backpacks, but other than that, the container is up to you.
Now I know we've talked, and we've been lucky enough to have you, I should say, on our channel here to talk about this before. So people who may have prepared a kit a few years ago might want to use this time to go back through it, because again, certain things in there do perish over time, or maybe perhaps have worn out, or maybe you borrowed those batteries to go put them in some other device throughout the year, and you think, well, I'll replace it. Well, now's the time to get that done, correct?
Exactly, and just because you put it in a kit, I encourage people to rotate the stock, because as you alluded to, food has expiration dates on it. And believe it or not, the water has an expiration rate. Not necessarily that the water goes bad, but the plastic that the water is in will break down. Trust me, I know. I realized I had 3 or 4 cases of milk jug type water in a closet, and I found out the hard way that they didn't hold up over a period of time. So rotating your stock becomes very important.
And of course, again, when you're considering what to do as far as to prepare, every situation is going to be different. Again, every situation will call for different things. And so what we're trying to do here today is just cover the basic tenets, the things that you want to get out there to consider. And again, always being prepared and being set up ahead of time are key. And again, you mentioned earlier your website has some great resources. Just other sources of information in general that you would refer people to when they're thinking about what they need to do. Just any tips and things you can offer in that respect?
Of course, in addition to our website, the Ready Virginia website, Ready Hampton Roads website. They kind of link all of that together. They list all the Hampton Roads localities on the Ready Hampton Roads website. But the nice thing about going to these 2 particular places, you're going to get the same basic information, and that won't overwhelm an individual. When you're not getting that same information level, people become confused. And that's one of the things that we've tried to strive for in the Hampton Roads area, is to make sure that individuals get that same information where they can make that good informed decision for their families.
Now, one thing I haven't noted, we are coming to you from inside the City of Suffolk Emergency Operations Center. This is located, of course, on Kings Fork Road in Fire Station 6, also the headquarters for the Fire and Rescue Department here in the City of Suffolk. Tell us a little bit about what we have going on in the room we're in now, and also what other aspects of this site kind of get fired up in the event that we have to activate the EOC.
Okay. Well, the basic room is where the city runs in the event of an emergency. All your key department heads are here. Also here is the city's Joint Information Center, which is where all the media releases comes in and out of the city. And they also coordinate the information from the other cities to help make sure, again, everybody's on the same sheet of music. Another function that goes on here is the call center. This is the area where those non-emergency calls, when I say non-emergency, no fire, police, or EMS calls come in. This is where an individual can call for information like, or to report information like the lights are out in my area, There's where can I go to get food? What stores are open?
Right.
You got any idea when the lights are coming back on?
Correct.
We can coordinate all that information through here. We might not give you the information that you want at that very moment,
Yes.
but we can give you reliable information, and it's a lot easier than talking to a machine.
Indeed.
The call center is one of my top priorities, always been, because I personally don't like talking to a machine.
Right.
And I feel like an individual in
Yes.
an emergency situation needs to talk to a living, breathing human being, where they can get that information. If they can't get that information, they can be directed to
Correct.
the proper place.
And I think that's where you talk about the flexibility of a human being versus a machine sometimes, where certainly if it's a stressful situation and you need to get that information now, of course everybody in the event of an emergency wants to get their information now, but to have that flexibility, and of course we're staffing that with City of Suffolk employees or people that are affiliated with the city that can produce that information and be the voice on the other end of the phone that's providing you information, resources, or at least connecting you with who can help.
Yeah.
And I think that's the important thing. And the Emergency Operations Center, I know it can be open 24/7 depending upon the circumstances. Again, we've been lucky enough not to have to fully activate it in recent years, but again, we're always one emergency away from that having to happen.
Absolutely.
And having these resources ready, that theoretically you come in, you so to speak, turn the lights on, turn the computers up. You get the bodies in here to staff it, which are important as well. And you have your part running. Everybody else is doing their part. It makes everything flow. And as you said, we're operating the city out of this facility.
Yeah, in years past, we had all this stuff in boxes, and you had to cart it out and
Yes.
set it up. And the unfortunate realization that we came about in 2008,
Right.
that we used to count on the firefighters to help set this up. Well, we learned in 2008 all the firefighters were out on the incident, and we didn't have anybody to set it up.
Correct.
So we had to scramble to get it up.
Yes.
This is what we call a hot facility. It's ready to go just
Yes.
by cutting the light switches on. And we're very fortunate to be one of the few facilities, one of the few cities in Hampton Roads that has this type of facility.
It's good to have technology, but it needs to work when you need it to work.
Absolutely.
And quickly, too.
And I do have a backup for this
Yes.
technology. I still have my old paper forms that we used to have just in
Paper,
case.
what's that? But again, that's the key. That's being prepared.
Yes.
And running drills and practicing and getting training, which of course you're working on throughout the year to make sure that everything is ready to go in the event that it is called open. Because it doesn't have to be hurricane season for this facility to be active.
Oh.
Again, a tornado, which we referenced earlier. You can have a severe snowstorm or any situation where it could require city services to be ramped up to that level.
Hazardous materials
That's
incident?
right. That's right. It can happen anytime, anywhere. But again, being prepared and having the City of Suffolk ready to respond with whatever resources we can is important. As we close out this program, Captain Judkins, anything you would offer to the people that are watching the show as far as just as we think about the 2015 hurricane season, which is upon us now?
Well, again, I'm kind of back up to what we were talking about when we started the show. Again, don't take for granted that, hey, I don't have to do anything. This is going to be a slow hurricane season. You need to always be prepared, irregardless of what you're talking about. Hurricane season, yeah. But if that basic kit and that basic family disaster plan will fill a multitude of situations that you could be confronted in.
Right.
So if you have those up to date and go through it at least annually,
Yes.
the kits and your plan, then you should survive things that would happen to us in the city very well.
Good deal. Well, Captain Judkins, thanks for joining us once again. And again, as we start with the 2015 hurricane season, we offer to you again to do your research, be prepared, and certainly if you have questions, Captain Judkins, if they would have questions and would like to reach out to you, do you have a phone number you could provide?
Oh, yes. My office phone number, 757-514-4536. And if I'm not in the office, leave a message and I will get back with you.
Good deal. So again, reliable folks on the other end of the phone that can certainly assist with you both before, during, and after a storm in the event that we would have one hit this hurricane season. So again, stay safe, stay prepared, and be ready. 2015 hurricane season is upon us. I'm your host, Tim Kelly. We'll see you again next time on Safety First.